Hello, and welcome to another episode of Capra Critiques. Today, I want to go over the new R series from Audio Technica, the R30X, the R50X, and the R70XA. I'm looping those all in together because they're very similar builds, and you're going to get all the information you want basically by taking apart one of them. So the R30X and the R50X they're pretty underwhelming. I think the R50X is still a decent deal for most people if you can handle the treble. That's going to be the main thing across these three headphones. R30X is the brightest. You can see that red line. It's going up pretty high in the upper treble. Then R50X is also pretty bright, even in the lower treble. And the R70XA also has a tinge bit of brightness in about the same areas as the R50X, minus the lower treble. I think the R30X is a good value for $100. I think it sounds good enough for use. There are other problems which would prevent me from buying this as a first-time user. And the R70XA I actually do enjoy using. With a caveat, because I own all three of these, I've been able to test around with some things. The R50X pads. These pads are great on the R70XA and on the R30X. Both of these headphones sound much better with these R50X pads. I don't know if Audio Technica is selling them right now. Actually, I can Google things. No, it does not look like they sell it. So that's unfortunate, because if they did sell it, it would be pretty nice to just be able to quickly upgrade the R70XA, especially since you're paying so much for the R70XA. Now, a few other complaints I have about these is the connector style. Like, first off, you have the R30X, which does not have a replaceable cable. The R50X, which has a single entry 2.5 millimeter cable that's got a proprietary pinout on it, and then dual 2.5 millimeter, again, proprietary pinout connections, which makes finding a cable for these much harder, because the stock cable, as usual, is just not that good. Yeah, so the next problem I have with these is the headbands. So that it's a 50-50. On one hand, I really like the headbands because they are easy to bend. You can deform this headband and make it whatever clamp you want it to be. And you can change whatever size it is. So on the R70XA, you can see I've kind of flattened off the top here so that it fits more at a flat angle on the side of my head, instead of being as rounded off as this, or as pointed off as this one, because I've bent this one to make it a little bit clampier to try and help the seal on these. And that's a big thing that we can get into in a second after I talk about my obsession, which is the comfort strap. So the R50X comes with these pads, and I think it's a really cool idea that they have. Like, you can adjust these pads, you can unscrew it from here and there, and you can move the pads up and down here, and it's actually what keeps the wire that bridges the two sides together. I think that's a really cool way of handling that, even though I don't like single entry headphones. But yeah, onto the comfort straps, or comfort strings, if they were. So that's about a little over 1 inch wide at its widest, which is just ridiculously small. It's ridiculously small. I mean, for the fact that this is such a light headphone, like, it doesn't weigh that much, and it's pretty comfortable because of that. This strap just, like, you could have just made it wider. You could have just made it wider. It wouldn't have made it look weird. In fact, it would have looked less weird than this, freaking thong of a comfort strap. On the R30X, they have almost the same comfort strap. They could have saved money by making one or the other in bulk and just using that. I feel like if they had used the quality of the R70XA one and had used the Velcro clasp of the R30X, then it would have just made their whole product line better. Especially because on the R70XA, this strap is held together with magnets. Magnets. which is really cool, except when you put a little bit of pressure up here, the magnet just pops off. And so if you try to pull them down to settle them in place, because this is kind of stiff, so when you pull it like this, and you pull it up like that, it pops off. I ran into that problem a lot. And so the first thing I did when I got these headphones was I made a Capra strap for them, like I do with the majority of headphones that I get my hands on. Not all of them, but the majority of them. Some of them, like the Sony XM4s, I loathe those because I can't make a strap for them. At least not one that's graceful. Or gracefully mounted, I should say. It would be a very complex design because it's like the top center section here is where the arms extend out of. So the only static points I have are right next to each other up here. And you can't really mount to that with a strap that's long enough to be comfortable. But yeah, I made a Capra strap for these. This fits on all three of the models. You just have to remove the pads from this one, and it just wraps around the yokes there. I almost made it so that it was a 1-to-1 mounting on the side here, but then it wouldn't have been compatible with all the models because some of these headbands are bigger than the others. So the R50X headband is about 3-4 millimeters wider for some reason. Not sure why. And let's see, is the R30X? Yeah, the R30X headband is about the same width as the R70XA. So weirdly enough, the R30X and the R70XA on the two ends of the spectrum are more similar to each other than the R50XA or the R50X, which I find to be a little bit weird. So yeah, big improvement with this strap. Unfortunately, it does reduce the max extension of the headphone. So if you have a much bigger head there, then like if you max out these settings all the way down, then it's just not going to fit you. And that's the case with a lot of my straps. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So yeah, that's the main problems with the headbands that I have. So we can stop talking about headbands. The thing I wanted to talk about with these is, so that everyone knows, everyone who's reviewed this has mentioned that the ear pads are really small. It doesn't really fit your ears in there unless you have smaller ears. They just barely fit me, but it's still touching the top and bottom of my ear on all three of these pads, which is very unfortunate. They could have made these headphones a little bit bigger. They could have made the pads a little bit more open in the center, and it would have been just fine. They're still pretty thin, which is unfortunate, but I guess it's kind of compensated for because I do really like the sound of the R70XA. It has that mid-forwardness that I really enjoy, and it's not lacking bass, which is mids and bass are the two things I mainly look for in a headphone. Treble, I can kind of stand brighter treble. I prefer it a little bit darker, but I can stand brighter treble. So yeah, the pads are simple. The next thing I want to talk about is the pad mounting. So on all of these, they have it's a pad lip, which we like to see, but all of them have this little bump at the back here, which is supposed to, on a human head, there's a dip here. On average, there's a dip right behind your ear, and so this is supposed to push a little bit further behind your ear to cause it to seal. Now this bump is only 3-4 millimeters, so it's really kind of pointless, especially when you have this foam ring around here, basically making the entire baffle the same height. So it kind of negates itself there, and I'm not sure why they did it, but they did it. And I would have really liked to have seen them pronounce this even more and have it a little bit further down, because if you notice on most people's heads, the dip down here is actually going to be more than the dip up here. A lot of people are still flat up here. If you can see right there, sorry. And so I would have liked to have seen it more pronounced down towards the back and towards the bottom. You can see this actually, Sivga seems to have figured this out on their pads on the SV023. The back bottom of the pads themselves are thicker, which I found really comfortable when I tried that at Expona. I really liked the way that felt. It's just a shame that those headphones didn't sound good to me. But this also does show up on the new clamp force measurement rig. So I can show you here in a second how those do and what those look like with the new tool, with the new web tool I've got. The other thing about the R50X is that it has that same bump in the back, but it also has springs in the swivel mechanism here, which causes it to swing out. Now, let's see, that's the left, that's the right, so this causes it to tilt forward. As I'll just go ahead and show you this. So I need to plug that in. And we'll go ahead and connect to it. Let's see, COM16, connect. That'll reboot. Alrighty. Make sure that that's centered on there. I'll give it a second to tear out or to localize. So you can see it's pressing a little bit. You can see the center of pressure. Here's the front of the rig, which is this way, and the back of the rig, which is towards that speaker. You can see the center of pressure is slightly towards the front, which is because it's twisting like that with the spring. So it's gonna push more on your cheekbones and jaw than it will on the back of your head to seal properly. And so I'd have liked to have seen that have been put in the other way. And I know some people have talked about this before, and I don't know if Audio Technica has addressed it yet. Comment below if you know anything about that. But you can see in comparison to the okay. There we go. The R70XA should be a little bit more centered, with a little bit more towards the back because of that ridge. So a little bit towards the back, a little bit down, and yeah, I have it centered on there, so it's working fine. But yeah, this is the new visualization for clamp force pressure, and you can see it's doing 263 grams of clamp force at the moment. The actual values for that need to be calculated across many measurements in the different positions, because you can extend this out to test a variety of head sizes. But I'll just put it there for now. So yeah, that's the clamp force, the headphones, the pads, and I assume you guys want me to take it apart at this point, and it's pretty much the same for all three of them. I'm just going to go ahead and do it on the R50X because it's the most unique. So the pads come off. It's a pad lip. We love pad lips. And then it's a small Phillips head bit to get the 4 screws out. Fun thing about these 3 SKUs is that they were made, I believe, so that they could sell at 3 different price points. And so they had to make cost-saving measures on the lower-end models. Now, something I know about the manufacturing process is that these injection molded parts cost a lot of money to make the molds for. And so having to make different molds per SKU raises the price significantly. So that's easy. That comes apart. It's just 4 screws to take the baffle off, and then the wire just lays in there, goes across the headband to the other side, and then there's a connector on this side. So nothing special here. Another 4 screws to take off the cover for the driver. Which is just a plastic shroud covering the cable and the driver. So nothing really fancy going on here. Just, you know, basic stuff. But the fact that they had to make all three of these use A, different connectors, B, different wires because of that, C, different shells because of that, when they could have just, say, for instance, they could have just made the R70X, R70XA chassis, and, or even just if they wanted to mix and match the R50X and the R30X chassis, well, they could have taken the R50X chassis and used it on the R30X, and all they would have had to change was the baffle and the driver cover, because they use a different driver in the R30X. The R50X and the R70XA all have different... Oh. I put the wrong screws back in. Which is weird that they even use different screws, because they're the same threading. It's just some of these screws have a larger head. And I think that's just for the visuals, because it's not actually holding that much weight or that much force. Anyway, that's been the new Audio Technica R series, the R70XA, R50X, and R30X, also featuring the new Capra Audio clamp force measurement rig, which you can find on our website right now for 50% off. If you have any questions or comments, go below, subscribe if you want, and hope you have a nice day.